Greetings, this is Jeff Riddle. I'm the pastor of Christ Reformed Baptist Church in Louisa, Virginia. This is an audio version of a book review that I have written. The book under review was written by Keith Underhill. It's titled Planted by the Providence of God, and the subtitle is The Story of Trinity Baptist Church, Nairobi. This was published by Broken Wharf in 2023. And the book is 510 pages in length. My written review of this book first appeared in the Puritan Reformed Journal, Volume 17, Number 2, in July of 2025, and it can be found there in that issue on pages 279 to 283. And so with that, let's move on to the review. It has been said that the work of ministry in the church can be compared to visiting a restaurant. Most people who go to a restaurant are met at the door and ushered to their seats in the dining room, where they are served a tasty and filling meal in a cordial and pleasant atmosphere. Walk out of the dining room and into the kitchen, however, and one may find a very different scene. The servers are rushing about to fulfill their tasks. The meal is being prepared and instructions are being delivered, and on occasion, voices might be raised as the staff works out their differences. To be in ministry, both at home and cross-culturally, is to know life in both the dining room and the kitchen. Keith Underhill, born in 1945, is a pioneer, confessionally reformed Baptist missionary pastor who served in the African nation of Kenya for some 40 years, from 1975 to 2015. During that time, Underhill experienced great success in ministry, but also discouraging lows. In this book, the author ushers the reader both into the dining room and into the kitchen. He also reminds us over and again that ministry is indeed filled with suffering. This extended work might actually be described as 3 books in one. It is 1, a memoir of Underhill's life and ministry; 2, an invaluable missionary history of the Reformed Baptist movement in Kenya; and 3, a manual of church order. And in a footnote I add, I might also add a 4th book category, a photo album, as the work includes 3 attractive interspersed collections of vivid, glossy, full-color photos, visually cataloging Underhill's ministry in Kenya. The 3rd part, the ecclesiological manual, is interspersed throughout the narrative, printed on gray paper to distinguish it from the rest of the content. This manual covers some 22 topics, offering each under the heading of biblical foundations, from a theology of the Great Commission, Part 1, titled The Great Commission, to a theology of preaching, Part 22, titled The Centrality of Preaching. The chronological structure of the book is fourfold. Phase 1, Preparation to 1977, found on pages 3 to 102. Phase 2, Church Planting, from 1977 to 1989, found on pages 103 to 184. Phase 3, Church Consolidation, from 1989 to 2006, found on pages 185 to 400. And Phase 4, Church Maturing, from 2006 to 2015, found on pages 400 to 510. Phase 1 begins with a brief note on the author's Methodist upbringing and proceeds to describe his university years in Aberystwyth, Wales, where he was converted, baptized, and joined in membership to Alfred Place Baptist Church. It was also at this time that Underhill experienced a call to ministry and missions. One key to those early years was the connection Underhill developed with Pastor Jeff Thomas, who would prove a friend who loveth at all times, and a brother born for adversity. Proverbs 17:17. After university, Underhill went to Kenya for short-term service as a school teacher from 1968 to 1970. His call to ministry having been solidified, he followed in his pastor's footsteps to enroll at Westminster Theological Seminary in Philadelphia from 1971 to 1974. During his stint in the United States, Underhill met with Reformed Baptists in America and was also introduced to his wife Priscilla, whose family was part of Trinity Reformed Baptist Church in New Jersey. After completing seminary, Underhill and his young family, a son had been born, was sent by his home church in Wales to serve in Kenya. His initial assignment was as a teacher in a Bible school in Thika. In God's providence, service in that ministry ended abruptly in 1977 due to conflict over educational philosophy, a harbinger perhaps of more serious conflicts to come. Phase 2 outlines Underhill's transition to the Kenyan capital of Nairobi, where he would plant Trinity Baptist Church, the first 1689 affirming confessional Baptist church in that nation. This church was constituted in 1979 with 10 members. Unlike most churches in Kenya, and elsewhere for that matter, Trinity Baptist Church began with a serious, intentional, and disciplined understanding of church membership. The difficult-to-obtain official registration with the Kenyan government was not granted until 1981. By 1989, land had been purchased and a building constructed. Underhill candidly notes that growth was slow and disappointments were many. After 11 years, there were only 23 members and very few conversions, he says on page 176. He exhorts, quote, "Perseverance is absolutely necessary," end quote, page 177. Underhill and the church remained diligent, ministering to refugees, starting and nurturing church plants, and establishing the pastor's training course for theological and ministry training. Phase 3 covers the growth of the church and the consolidation of its ministries. Though numerical growth remained slow, the membership stood at only 38 in 1996, Underhill outlines the struggle at this time to maintain a disciplined approach to church membership and a distinctively reformed approach to ministry and church life, including the appointment of biblically qualified church officers, the maintenance of the regulative principle of worship, and the formation of an association of Reformed Baptist churches in Kenya. Finally, Phase 4 describes the maturing of the church. It begins sadly with a frank and open account of a significant storm of conflict that developed in the church, centering on a division between Underhill and one of his fellow elders. Despite decades of diligent and faithful ministry, Underhill was accused by some of demonstrating a so-called domineering spirit. Mediation was sought through representatives from ARBCA, the Association of Reformed Baptist Churches of America, but it failed to secure reconciliation and even resulted in ARBCA's withdrawal of support. Jeff Thomas and the Sending Church in Wales, however, after examining the circumstances, remained steadfast in supporting the work. In a letter cited in the book, Thomas notes that Underhill, quote, "like all of us, has the defects of his qualities. He is not built on yielding lines. Keith is a stickler for doing things properly," end quote. And yet Thomas maintains that Underhill was worthy of confidence, support, and service. The church in Nairobi also stood by Underhill, though the conflict resulted in significant departures. At the start of 2008, there were 84 resident members, and in 2009, only 53. See pages 410 and 411. After the storm, however, calm was restored, and by 2015, the membership had risen to 95. Underhill concludes his account in November of 2015, when he and his family left Kenya and relocated to Liverpool, England. In a postscript written in 2022, he notes that the church he planted is now served by 3 elders, and its membership stands at about 150. What is more, Trinity Baptist Church has been instrumental in planting some 50 Reformed Baptist churches in Kenya. See page 470. When pondering whether he would do anything differently, Underhill confidently answers, quote, "No, with regard to the basic principles of preaching, discipling, and church planting," end quote, page 510. He adds that, quote, "No gospel work has ever been immune from such problems, whether to a greater or lesser extent," end quote, and concludes, quote, "There remains much work to be done," end quote, page 510. This book is useful on several levels. First, historically, it is an invaluable record of the establishment of the Reformed Baptist movement in Kenya. Underhill often goes into tedious and painstaking, at times repetitious detail about the ministry of his church and its various church planting efforts. Later readers and historians, however, are likely to profit from this attention to detail. Second, missiologically, this book represents a significant attempt to articulate a Reformed Baptist theology of cross-cultural ministry and church planting. Underhill offers many insights into various issues in the African context, like biblical approaches to polygamy, the roles of men and women in African society, dealing with the wedding dowry, witnessing to Muslims, etc. Third, pastorally, this volume contains extensive reflections and guidance on aspects of pursuing a theologically faithful, practical, and sound ministry. This emphasis is present not only in the frequently interspersed articles on biblical foundations, but it is also found throughout the memoir and historical narrative sections. Perhaps above all, this book, like many missionary biographies, is a testimony to perseverance in the face of significant disappointments and criticisms in ministry, while confidently holding to the sovereignty of God amid providential circumstances. Underhill describes the victories God allowed him to enjoy in his ministry, but he also gives more than ample space to the failures. In his summary of efforts to influence various churches and individuals, for example, Underhill describes how in 2010 he was invited to preach 3 sermons to a group called the African Church of Jesus Christ in Kenya, and even enrolled one young man from this group named Titus to the Trinity Pastors Course, or TPC, program. It seemed like a very hopeful start. Underhill, however, then concludes, quote, "Nothing came out of this. Titus did not last the first year at the TPC," end quote, page 483. On the next page, he notes efforts to strengthen church plants and train leaders in a place called Pokot North. He observes, quote, "5 men started the TPC, but sadly none of them completed, and just one is laboring in the ministry," end quote, page 484. This is just a sampling of some of the many anecdotes Underhill shares. The cumulative effect is to remind the reader that success in ministry comes from the Lord, while our task is faithfulness. Underhill at one point observes, "There have been many struggles, many failures, but the word of the Lord has not returned to him empty." See page 469. Planted by the providence of God is brimming with insights and statements that will resonate with all who labor in local church ministry across many cultures, whatever one's context. Underhill concludes the work by noting, quote, "There remains much work to be done. The work of reformation in Kenya is in its infancy. The false gospels of word of faith, Africanism, Catholicism, and social development are rampant. May the Lord be pleased to raise up laborers and to use them in the extension of his everlasting kingdom." End quote, page 510. To this, we can add a hearty amen. This book is warmly commended, and many no doubt will profit from the forthright access it provides to both the dining room and the kitchen in one man's ministry. Here ends the review. You can find audio book reviews and notes like this one, Word Magazine podcasts and sermons by going to the sermonaudio.com site of Christ Reformed Baptist Church. For video material, you can subscribe to the Word Magazine channel on youtube.com. You can also find written book reviews, notes, and articles on my blog at jeffriddle.net. And you can also find there a link to articles and reviews that I have written on my academia.edu page. And you can follow me on Twitter or X at Riddle1689.